So it's lovely to be back at Damson Farm with this lovely autumnal light and dew on the ground. Yes, it's slightly chilly, but it's the perfect time for some good autumn gardening jobs. And one of those is division. So this patch here is in dappled shade, and it's growing this lovely plant called Thelema. Now, it's a close relative of Heuchera and Tiarella, and the leaves look very similar. Another word for it is fringe cup. So in the spring, this shoots up a spike of flowers with little white cups with lovely fringed petals. So a really pretty plant, and now's the perfect time to divide it. Now, from here, with a bit of careful prizing, I reckon we can get 3 or 4 good plants, but with a bit of extra, you could, if you wanted to, get even more. I'm gonna get my dog absolutely covered in soil here. Go on, find somewhere else to play. Spring and autumn are the best time for doing division of perennial plants. Now, the benefit from doing this now is that over the winter, these roots have even more chance to put on some growth, get really, really strong and well established. Maybe in the spring, the flowers will not be quite so prolific, but from then on, and each year, they should get stronger and stronger and be really healthy plants. And with getting them from the garden, all of the mycorrhiza, all of the bacteria that are already in the soil and interacting with this plant to keep it healthy will go into its new home and keep these little new plants healthy as well. Now, this is just one of the things that I'm planning on adding to a container. But here are some of the other lovely things we have to share with you today. Arit explains the secret of great design from a couple's garden in Oxfordshire.
The wraparound of glass obviously lets lots of light come into this part of the home. But also what it does is put the garden on view 24/7.
We meet a teacher in Bristol who shares his appreciation for apples at a city centre allotment.
Over 40 kinds of tree fruit, probably, are in 1/2 of an allotment plot, and we get lots and lots of fruit off here, and it's just wonderful.
Nick shines a spotlight on the plant science behind the importance of light.
Gosh, the difference really is astonishing, isn't it? I mean, this is nuts.
And we join Sue at home as she propagates and plans for next year.
For now, I'm going to pop them into water. Later on, I'm going to put them into a peat-free compost, and they should romp away.
Now, I have been coming here for the last couple of seasons and seen the garden change, and it's always such a beautiful space. And that's really because Alison Jenkins, who lives here and gardens here, has put it together so very well. When I first came here, Alison and I planted some salads in containers just here on the decking. Now that all of the crops in here are well and truly over and the harvest is finished, it's time to replenish these containers. And although you might want to leave some of them clear to grow crops in again, this one here is going to become a permanent display of perennials. So what I'm going to do is just enrich the compost that's in here. I won't throw it all away. So I'm just going to add homemade compost to this container, and that will bring nitrogen and potash and phosphates and all of those good plant nutrients that are needed for plant growth. But it will also bring with it some weed seeds. So when this is finished, I will just mulch the whole thing with some shop-bought compost, which has been sterilised, and that will act as a weed-suppressing mulch. And the first plant I'm going to add to this is a bulb. Obviously, autumn is bulb planting time of the year. This is a narcissus, a daffodil, called Thalia. And it's one of my favourite daffodils. It's got a pure white flower, and it's scented. And if you plant them really densely, they look great. Eventually, when I actually plant them, I'm going to dig them down because they are quite large bulbs. And generally, as a rule of thumb, a bulb needs to be planted about 3 times its own depth. So that will eventually be a good trowel's depth below the top of this container. So I will dig these in. her. That is not a dog bed. There we go. When you're planting a bulb, there is always an up and a down. So look for the root plate, the basal plate, that's this bit at the bottom, that's got the roots coming out of it. And then the tip is the growing tip where the leaves will come. And always make sure you're putting healthy bulbs in. Sometimes they can go a little bit soft, but a nice firm bulb should make a healthy plant. Now, I'm going to add this compost to the top. So just a thick mulch to stop the weeds from coming up. There we go. In terms of the actual planting that's going into here, some of it comes from the garden. So there's the Thelema that I divided just now, and also some Melica, which has come from the garden. That is a beautiful ornamental grass, really, really underrated. There are also some plants that have been brought in, like this. This is a Carex Appalachica. And I'll put 3 of them in with a fern. This is a polypody, and another 3 of those will give an evergreen structure throughout the pot. If I just get the placement of those first off, sets of 3 or 5 do create balance in a container, and a slightly symmetrical layout will make this look good from every angle. Obviously, if you were putting it against a wall, you'd want more interesting things at the front and taller things at the back. So if I get them actually planted in, we can work the rest from that point. These are all very well adapted woodland plants, so this container is perfect for a shady position in the garden, which can be tricky to fill with interest. So I think one of the easiest and most effective ways to do that is to use evergreens. Use the colour green. Best colour there is anyway. There's a window here and a room behind. I think wherever you have a window and a view out onto the garden, if you're lucky enough to have that, you should fill it with beauty. So little containers like this draw your eye out and create something beautiful to look at, even in the depths of winter when you may not actually want to go outside into the garden. So the next thing to go in will be the Thelema I divided earlier on. And because that has quite a tall flower spike, that will look best in the middle. I'll just snip off the dead leaves and stems just to make it look really neat. Because I think when you have something in a container display, you really are displaying it. If I was just plonking this back in the border, probably wouldn't go to that much effort, but there we go. Nice and neat. Now the last plant I'm going to add is this Melica. But just again, I'm going to tidy them up a little. So don't go throughout and then sprout up through the whole display and create a little bit of chaos in this very symmetrical planter. It is so special to be able to look out of the window and see your garden. And the way that our gardens interact with our homes is a really interesting element of garden design. Now, Arit went to Oxfordshire to discover more.
We gardeners get so attached to our outdoor spaces, and why wouldn't we? We spend precious hours nurturing and loving the space that is our unique garden, our piece of land. So when we have to reluctantly give it all up and move on, it can be heartbreaking. For Jan and Ken, moving from their cherished rural garden with sweeping views to a smaller garden was a huge decision, but it was also an opportunity to create something new.
I'm delighted with how mature looking the garden is. And I'll get up and I'll walk around this garden at 6 in the morning And it's beautiful with the sunrise. It's really lovely. Takes on a different look.
What was your sort of ideas and vision that you had for it?
We decided the most important thing was to have a practical garden that I could always enjoy.
The main thing was low maintenance. You notice there's no grass.
And we're getting to the age where we thought we really ought to always be able to cope with it.
It needed to be future-proof. No steps.
One level.
One
yeah.
level. And that involved quite a lot of earth moving. It was a mud bath.
Yeah, very, very wet. And then when I stood here and I thought, this is the weirdest shaped plot. What are we going to do with it?
I really love that Jan and Ken were very specific in the fact that they did not want lawn in this garden. They'd had enough of it, but that means they get lots of plants. And I really love this planting palette, actually. I think there's some nice touches. Using the grasses, this panicum here, and the Hackana continual movement that will be within this space, which is important. There's a lot of open paving here. But then to have the static, more solid plants, things like the Hylotelethum here, the euballs, that also holds the structure of the planting together, and that's really important. And having height within the space, things like the Persicaria, as well as that Actaea, gives you a sense of being immersed within the garden space. Not everything's down at a low level, but at the low level, important ground cover. So things like the Ajuga here, that helps to keep the suppression of weeds. So this palette of plants is not only looking good, but there's functionality to it as well. Boundaries should always be considered in the garden. Either lose them and make sure that they just become secondary within the design, or here, celebrate them and bring them forward. So this is larch fencing panels. I have to say, I think it really does work. It was really important to Jan and Ken to have the garden on one level, and it's a good consideration when you're thinking ahead. Now, this non-slip of this porcelain is very practical, but also as well, it runs seamlessly into the rest of the house. But the designers also used this lovely brick paver, and I like how it's creating this meandered pathway around this border, framing it. But it's also adding colour into the garden, and it picks up the accents of the stem on the Actaea, even the little flowers on the Hackana there. So this subtlety of colour is an actual very clever design punch in this garden. The house and garden are only 2 years old, and the borders are maturing so well, but a house when it's new can feel quite stark and quite out of place. By cloaking it with climbers like this evergreen Tracheospermum, it starts to give it a sense of place already, a sense of age. So, got an empty wall? Put a climber on it. Having a water feature was a non-negotiable because it had the practical solution of helping to muffle the sound of the road alongside the garden, but as an actual focal point in this garden, I think it's wonderful. I love the copper reel here. It's going to patina so nicely, give it a lovely verdigris colour. But this old trough, this stone trough, it's got such a sense of place. Really grounds the design. The wraparound of glass in this lower portion of the house obviously lets lots of light come into this part of the home. But also what it does is put the garden on view 24/7. What that means is that the planting and the design within it, therefore, has to be looking on point all times of the year. And that's been achieved through evergreen planting, gorgeous trees that have got structural interest even when they defoliate. And it's even making sure that the perennials can work into the winter months. So things like the hack and the clover go a gorgeous golden colour and don't need to be cut down until February or March. So when you've got a garden like this that is actually surrounding the house, celebrate it, bring it right up inside and enjoy it.
It's definitely true that as well as all the design challenges that come with a new garden, there's that emotional wrench of saying goodbye to something you've put so many years and so much love into. It's always tough. Now, this is, or was, the meadow, and it's now been cut back and turned into hay. And grass clippings in themselves can build up over the summer. And it's sometimes hard to know what to do with all of that plant material, but Alison actually has a very cool way of dealing with all of her cut back plants. Hi, Alison.
Oh, hiya.
Aren't we lucky with the sunshine?
I know, isn't it gorgeous?
Beautiful. Now, tell me what you're going to do with this hay, because I know this is where the squashes were growing before, but what is the plan with all of this?
So I've been making these compost cakes for a few years now, and I adapted it from a method I learnt that was taught really as an approach to, it's a way you can make compost without having a compost bin. You can do a freestanding cake. But as I was learning it, I was thinking, oh, I've got loads of hay from my meadow, but I wouldn't reuse that as compost because it's got lots of grass seed in, but it actually works perfectly to build these structures in the field, to use them as a place to grow squash, because they're big and sprawly and they can just spread.
And we've all seen pumpkins that have germinated in the compost heap, being really happy. So what are these twigs doing at the centre there?
So that's really mainly to give some aeration in the bottom and then layering different materials. So obviously I've got quite a lot of hay and then whatever else we have to hand. So we usually have a lot of nettles, grass clippings, so just kind of layers of different materials and then wetting it in between.
Right, shall we start the first layer?
Yes.
So what are these uprights for?
The idea is to create a defined shape, not just a big pile of stuff. You need a relatively decent size, I'd say minimum 2 metres really, just so that you've got enough material for it to break down.
So basically, anybody could do this with whatever materials they're cutting back.
So long as you've got that good balance between your browns and your greens, your carbon and
Woody
your nitrogen.
material and leafy material, basically.
Yeah.
Shall I do this side? Yeah. Thanks. I guess it's going to be quite tall. In the middle, it would be bone dry for a long time if it wasn't wet.
So yeah, each layer we tend to water. It just helps everything break down. So the microorganisms need a moist environment to be active.
There you go. So what is the next layer going to be now?
Well, we can use some of the old compost from the previous year's compost cake. So yeah, if you just have a little feel of what's going on in there. It's just, you know, it's all really composted down.
Oh, wow, that's really, really nice, isn't it? It's a beautiful texture. Perfect.
Yeah, so we reuse that and we'll layer that between all the new layers of hay and other herbaceous material.
Amazing. I'm going to try this on my allotment. I'm going to do it. It's inspired me, Alison.
Good.
I'm just gathering a few of the windfalls that are way beyond eating to add to Alison's compost cake, and ones that have rodent damage. Now, it's a really common worry if you have a compost heap that you don't want to add food to it because you can bring things like rats in. But here, I figured they're going to be eating the apples when they're on the ground rather than bothering to go to the effort of burrowing into a compost heap to get them. So I'm going to put a few windfalls into that compost cake. Now, isn't this orchard just beautiful and idyllic? But you do not need acres and acres to be able to grow a lovely, beautiful and very productive collection of apples.
At the moment, this country imports probably about 85% of the fruit. And admittedly, a fair amount of that will be citrus and bananas. But we could grow so much more, and I'm really interested to see how much we can get into a small space, and anybody can do that. My name's Tim Foster, and this is my allotment, and I teach gardening here in sunny Bristol. Over 40 kinds of tree fruit, probably, are in 1/2 of an allotment plot. It's a very abundant plot, and we get lots and lots of fruit off here, and it's just wonderful. So to enable us to get as many trees in as possible, we've used a number of different techniques. So simply, one of the most obvious ways of trying to get fruit into a small space is to have a small plant. And with a tree, you would normally think that's not possible, but here we have a little apple tree, and this particular variety is one called Darcy Spice. And just behind me, in the brassica cage, we've got kale and purple sprouting broccoli, which is probably larger in this little tree. What determines the size of a tree is the rootstock, and every tree that we buy, virtually anyway, has been grafted. That means that a piece has been taken from a variety which will have the fruit that you want to eat. That's called the scion, and it's grafted to attach it to the top of the very dwarfing rootstock, and then the rootstock is in the ground and will influence the size. Something people say is, why are you growing so many apples? Well, each individual tree doesn't necessarily produce a huge amount, so it's the range which is quite important. The total quantity of apples, yes, we've got quite a lot, but they're all used and they are spread out over the months, and so, yeah, we need them all. So another way of getting a lot of fruit into a small space is to actually grow them on single stems. And we've got 7 trees in a line along here. That means I've got 7 varieties of apple, and when one doesn't produce in one year, it doesn't matter because I've got the others there. The very first one is one called Tom Putt. It's an early cooker, and that means it's ready when the blackberries are ready, and that can't be any better than blackberry and apple. At the other end of the row of cordons, we've got a complete contrast. This is a dessert apple, and it's one called Pitmaston Pineapple, and it's just a delightful little fruit, which genuinely do have a hint of pineapple about them. Magic. You won't get anything like that in a supermarket. You've got to grow it yourself. Cordons are grown in their particular way for a reason, and the cordons themselves are at 45 degrees, not upright. That's because those branches are being stressed slightly, and it encourages flowering and fruiting. We can do a very similar thing with a freestanding tree where the branches are upright and none are not fruiting terribly well. So we can bring the branches down from the vertical towards the horizontal by tying a weight on it. It's called festooning. Lovely name. All it is simply stressing those branches and getting them to fruit a little bit more easily. After time, if this works, the weight of the apples themselves will keep the branch down, and we won't need these, which is quite handy because when you're moving around, you quite often get a face full of log. So another great way of getting fruit into a small space, having that variety, is to have something slightly strange, and that's have to have one tree with more than one variety on it. It's called multi-grafting, and this particular tree has got 4 different varieties on it, and starting with Discovery, which is a slightly strawberry tasting fruit, fairly mild, but it's ready in August. That's followed by Ellison's Orange, tastes of aniseed, really a unique apple. The third one on here is called Winston, and that's terrific for storage. So we'll be eating those well into the new year. A little bit small, perhaps should have been thinned. Who's in charge here? Finally, at the back is a 4th variety, which I was donated because it's a very special one. It's called Cat's Head. Some places call it Pig Snout because of the shape of it. And the reason why it's special is because it's possibly from Roman times, certainly pre-medieval times. And I'm growing it possibly for that reason alone, because it's a pretty foul taste. I'd find it really difficult to pick out a particular variety which I'd say is the best. But if I was really pushed, it might be this one here. And this is a variety called Ashmead's Kernel. It's a really lovely, crisp, creamy white flesh, and the flavour is so complex and rich, it blows everything else out of the water. And this will store really well as well. I'm very pleased the way this has all turned out. It's a little sanctuary as much as anything, and I hope anybody visiting here will be able to see what is possible. And as a teacher, I quite like the idea that people could learn from how to grow trees, and particularly how we can all fit fruit trees into a small area and make sure that we all have homegrown fruit.
I loved that project. Tim seems such a lovely man, and the generosity of growing, learning yourself so that you can pass on not only the plants and the fruits to other people, but all that knowledge as well. It's such a lovely way of approaching gardening. Come on, Roo. Now, this may not be an edible fruit like an apple, but just look at the berries on this tree. They're like a metallic blue with this pink calyx behind. Really, really gorgeous. This is a Clerodendron trichotomum. It's a lovely tree, and when it's in flower, they're also heavily scented, so they fill the whole air with a beautiful smell. And I'm actually going to take some cuttings. Now, this is a plant that does throw up suckers, and one way of propagating it is to dig those suckers out with some roots as well. This one hasn't yet got big enough to do that, but this, I would say, is perfect for hardwood cuttings. It's got straight, vigorous growth that goes right the way up. It's non-fruiting, non-flowering, so it's really going to be great. Ooh. Look, one snip of a branch, and that is going to get me loads of potential new trees. I'm just going to go and check with Alison where she wants me to put them. But look at that! It's really coming on. Oh, Alison, that is so satisfying, isn't it?
They're quite satisfying to build.
Is it finished now?
Yeah, so we'll leave this now for the winter, and of course it will gradually kind of compost down to maybe half that size by June, you know, when we're ready to plant the squash out.
I have snipped off a piece of your Clerodendron. I was going to take some hardwood cuttings from it, but do you have an outside bed I could stick them in?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a nursery bed just down by the compost bins. So.
OK, yeah, perfect. I'll do that then.
Thank
See
you.
you soon. Who wouldn't want more of these beautiful, shimmering berries of Clerodendron? It may be early in the season for hardwood cuttings, but as the leaves are starting to turn yellow, it shows it's starting to enter dormancy. Taking hardwood cuttings is a really magical thing to do because From just one branch, you can actually get loads and loads of new plants. But the key to success in it is, number one, patience. Let things stay out in the bed for a good while. It might even be a year before they're gonna have good roots on them. And number two, it may sound obvious, but remembering which way's up and which way's down. Because in the middle of winter, if you're taking hardwood cuttings, there won't be leaves to help guide you. The way that I remember is I make a flat cut on the bottom, just below a node, and then a diagonal cut on the top, above a node. And the theory for that is that it means here, water will slide off the cutting and not sit on the top and rot it. You can do this with things like hazel, willow, alder, elder. Loads of woody plants will take well from hardwood cuttings. From one branch that's been pruned off that needed pruning off anyway, I've got 13 cuttings. They probably won't all take, but even if half of them do, and hopefully even more than that will, that's loads and loads of trees, a whole forest of clerodendron. Now, what I will do is just push them straight into the beds. If you had very stony or tough ground, I would dig a little trench, lay them in it, and then firm it back in so you don't damage the nodes as they go into the ground. But this is really nice soil. It's really important to remember that you label any hardwood cuttings because they will just look like twigs in the ground. They should start putting on shoots next summer, and then in the autumn, when they're going into their dormant period, that's the perfect time to move them. Now, I'll give them an initial water, but the great thing about doing this in the autumn is that they should get rained on fairly regularly. Isn't that incredible? Magical almost to be able to create so many plants from just one branch. Now, speaking of magical plants, Nick has been looking at plant science, and today he is taking a deep dive into light and how plants use it.
As gardeners, we know light is essential for our plants to grow and flourish.
You'll remember from school days that plants photosynthesize. They gather the energy from the sun via the green chlorophyll in their leaves and then combine it with water and carbon dioxide, which then goes on to fuel their growth.
It seems a remarkable feat for leaves, but these days scientists are discovering even cleverer skills.
It turns out that plant cells can differentiate between different types of light and have evolved astonishing ways to get just the right amount that they need, depending on where they live.
Many flowers in our borders need masses of light to flourish. But those on tropical forest floors have adapted to thrive in very deep shade. Associate Professor Heather Whitney is the incoming scientific director here at the University of Bristol Botanic Gardens.
Gosh, so this really does kind of set up that, I guess, tropical forest thing, just layers and layers of canopy, creating masses of shade down on the ground, right?
Absolutely. It can get really dark under here, but there are plants that can live right down at the bottom, but they've got some really strange adaptations to survive on tiny scraps of light.
Begonias are classic tropical shade plants, and they've evolved ingenious ways to thrive.
So you can see that some begonias have sort of this metallic coloration, and there's a range of ways they can produce sort of these metallic colours, one of which is to take the light harvesting structures in their leaves and actually then turn those into layer upon layer of structures. And those layers actually help slow the light down so they can squeeze every bit of energy out of the light.
In such deep shade, though, their growth is slow. And it's thought patterned and shiny leaves may also help deter hungry predators.
We've got some evidence for the fact that these metallic colorations might then protect that harvested light by really confusing the herbivores, because most leaves aren't metallic and aren't strange colours.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a sparkly leaf isn't an obvious choice in your salad, right?
Exactly. I don't think I've ever had an iridescent sweet.
Evolving ways to cope with deep shade is clever, but it's a fraction of plants' abilities. As humans, we see sunlight as one colour, but shade-tolerant and sun-loving plants can recognise the rainbow of wavelengths and colours within it.
So there are the usual red, yellow, blue and green that we all learn about at school. But sunlight is also made up of several other light wavelengths, such as ultraviolet, or there's even one called far red. And plants are not just able to distinguish between these different types of light, but they employ them in different ways and for different tactics.
Professor Kerry Franklin is a plant scientist specialising in how sun-loving plants actively avoid being in shade. And it's all about those different light waves.
So two of the most important wavelengths for plants are red and blue light, because they absorb these wavelengths and use them for photosynthesis as a source of energy.
And so something like this aster is going to be absolutely delighted. It's in full kind of open sunlight there, and it can fully function.
Absolutely, because if a plant grows over the top of your plant, it's going to block out all its light and stop it from photosynthesising.
And amazingly, plants can recognise if they're being shaded by a life-threatening neighbour rather than a passing cloud by measuring red and far red light. Kerry has a handy brolly for illustration.
When a plant grows over the top of another plant, the red light will be absorbed by the canopy, the leaves above, and used for photosynthesis. However, the far red light, which isn't used for photosynthesis, will pass through the canopy. So what the plant detects is less red light, but not less far red light. And that's the signal that it's being shaded by another plant and not a cloud.
Wow, so the fact that the shading plant ahead is absorbing certain wavelengths is what tells the little plant below that it's a plant that's shading it out.
That's right. And that's a desperate situation for the plant, so it rapidly elongates its stems to try and either overtop its neighbours or to find a gap in the canopy above.
Wow, so it's going to send up those shoots and elongate cells as quickly as it can.
That's right.
Back at the university, Kerry can show us exactly how that shade avoidance plays out. She has growing chambers which can shine different types of light on plants.
So within these chambers, we can actually change the lighting on different shelves to actually mimic canopy shade.
Wow, so in one cabinet you could effectively have, you know, a top section that's full blazing sunlight and a lower section that's emulating natural shade.
Yeah, that's right.
3 weeks ago, Kerry set up an experiment for us. She sowed 2 identical trays of mixed seeds. And once they germinated, she put one in full light and one in shade conditions. She also popped some radishes in for good measure. And they've all been growing.
Wow, they're so different. You can see the top batch are compact and chunky. I can see down here everything's so stretched and elongated and desperately seeking the light.
On closer inspection, the results are even clearer between the plants in full sun and those in shade conditions.
Gosh, the difference really is astonishing, isn't it? I mean, looking at these, you can see they're grown fairly conventionally. They're quite sort of squat and compact, ordinary-looking plants. Then this is nuts. This is nearly 50 centimetres tall in contrast. Wow. I mean, and all of this just because of light.
Absolutely. And this is what happens if plants stay in the shade. So they'll start off by elongating their stems. But if the shade signal persists and they're really in trouble, then they flower immediately to try and set seed.
And that's a kind of panic response, thinking I need to reproduce as fast as I can.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, yeah.
And I guess we've all seen the same kind of thing at home. If we've oversown a crop or something's kind of shaded out something we're growing, it sort of behaves in this same way, right?
So that's why planting density is so important. You need to space them out enough to get enough light so that they grow healthy, like the plants over there.
But looking at the radish roots, the difference is even more stark. The one in full light is healthy and tasty looking, while the shaded plant has bolted with barely any root at all. And all of this is due to plants recognising different light wavelengths and using them for information and growth.
We've all seen the plants in our gardens stretch as a result of heavy shade, but to understand the science of how and why that happens gives me a whole new respect for these amazing organisms.
When you see those two seed trays as a direct comparison, I know I've had seedlings like those unhealthy ones, and then plants that I put in the ground and have become like that. And just seeing how directly the light impacts it unlocks maybe where I've been going wrong in the past. So learning that plant science can really inform us to be better gardeners. The other thing that all plants obviously require is the correct temperature. And at this time of year, it's starting to get chilly, and there are some plants that will prefer to be indoors for the winter. So things like salvias, this is blackcurrant sage, might be okay with a cold winter as long as it's not too wet. But to be on the safe side, I'd bring that one in. This is Salvia elegans, or pineapple sage, and the leaves actually do smell really strongly of pineapple. It's a lovely thing. It's not yet flowered. It has red flowers that should come very, very soon. But by looking at these leaves, I can see they've begun to brown slightly. This is a warning for me that they need to come in now and get protected. This is another lovely, lovely, slightly tender plant. This is lemon verbena. So it can actually live outside if you're in a very mild and very dry area. But to be on the safe side, I would bring this in if it's in a pot. And I would put them all into an unheated greenhouse or an unheated conservatory. And if you don't have either of those things, against a south-facing wall, and then keep your eye on the weather forecast. If there's a frosty night forecast, cover them with some fleece or a blanket, and then they should be fine for next year. It might have got a bit chilly, but there are still some things that you can put out even at this time of the year. Biennials that have been growing this year but will hopefully flower next year can now be planted out if you've got them in modules like this. Some of them are not fully hardy and some of them are fully hardy, so it's always worth checking what will and what won't survive the winter. But I've got two here that should, one that definitely will. This one is Hesperus. So it looks very much like a rocket, but it's really beautifully scented, and that will flower next year. But you can see by the slightly purpling leaves that it's getting a little bit stressed now in its module. It's got a really good root system, absolutely perfect for planting out. So this should put on some roots and start getting some really healthy, vigorous green growth on the plant just in time for the winter. Hello, Rue. This next biennial is stock, and they are half hardy. So there is a chance that they'll survive the winter out here if we have a mild one. If you were in doubt, you could put some horticultural fleece over the top of them for the coldest parts of the year. But there is also a chance that the frost might kill them. So half of these I will pot into 9cm pots and put them in the greenhouse for the winter, and half of them I'll give a chance growing outside. But they're such lovely plants. In fact, both of these flowers are scented in the evening, so they're perfect for nighttime pollinators like moths. I'm giving them plenty of space in between each one. You could plant these where you want them to actually end up, but Alison isn't yet sure exactly where she does want these to end up. So this is kind of a holding bed for the winter, and then next spring they can be moved. Should be very happy in here until the spring when it can go outside. Now, this year we have been following Sue's garden as it changes, and today we're catching up with her as she takes stock of this glorious season.
We're well into autumn now, and there's still lots of things to do. And one of the things that I'm doing here is I'm removing some Japanese anemones. So we've got really windy weather and wet weather here in Wales. And these can really stand up to that. They hold their flower. Oh, there we go. They hold their flower in all that weather, so they're a stalwart of my garden. The reason I'm moving them out is because I planted this apricot rose, which I grew myself from a cutting, and they're crowding it out. So I want to give that rose space to develop. So, one more dig, I think, and it'll come. These plants aren't going to go to waste. They've got a job to do. Last year, my daughter decided to move house, and she asked me to help her with the garden because it needs quite a lot of work. So what I've been doing is I've gone around my garden with her, and she showed me all the plants that she likes. And I've dug some up, I've taken cuttings, I've taken, seeds and grown them on. And these are my final plants that I want to add to the list, but they need a bit of prep work. I'm cutting the tops off so the plant will send all its energies into growing new roots. For now, I'm going to pop them into water. Later on, I'm going to put them into a peat-free compost, and they should romp away. I'm a bit of a romantic, and gardening for me is all about creating connections and special memories. And one of the memories I have is my grandfather's walnut tree, and he gave a seed to my father, and a seed from my father's tree has come to me, and I want to do the same for my son. But the squirrels also like my walnuts, and despite me caging them and trying to fend them off, I've only managed to get 3. And there are a couple of different ways I'm going to do this to try and get success. Now, when they fall from the tree, they can look like this green one. It's not quite ripe yet, so it's not quite ready to try and plant. So this one, the husk has gone black and it's cracking, so it means it's ready to release the shell. And I'm going to try and do this. But if you do it, the sort of colour of it will stain the fingers. So I'm going to use a bit of paper to protect me and my clothes, and hopefully it'll open up. Oh, it's coming away really easily. That's a relief. And look, here's the shell, and inside is the nut. Marvellous. I'm going to put this shell with the nut inside into damp soil in a plastic bag. And I'm going to bury it in. Whoosh it up. Ooh, in you go. I'm going to put it in the fridge for a process of something called stratification, which is to mimic winter conditions, so it's nice and cold, and that will encourage it to germinate. And I think that's going to take about a month, so I'll check then, and all I'm looking for is a little white root. And once I see that, I'll bring it out and pot it on and keep it in a frost-free place, probably in my cold frame over winter. Now this one I've had soaking in water overnight to sort of soften the shell. And I'm just going to pop it in to a pot of soil. I'm going to cover it nicely with a good covering of soil to keep it warm. Firm it down a little bit. But the thing I'm really worried about is Mr. Squirrel. So I'm going to try and deter him. These are bits of bamboo from my bamboo plant. So I'm going to push them in at angles all around my walnut. I haven't a clue if this is going to work. He may think, I don't like that. Or it may be like Red Rag to a bull and he wants the challenge. I need to water it in. I've got 2 different options to get my walnut tree going, and I'll have to wait for this green one to blacken up a bit, and I may have success with that as well. Let's see what happens next year. I do enjoy eating garlic, but I find the cloves and the bulbs a bit small and fiddly. And the way round this, I've discovered, is elephant garlic. It's mild a tasting, but the cloves are huge and really easy to manage. And when I dig them up, I sometimes find a lot of these like little corms attached, like this one. So I'm decided to have a go at planting these corms. I've got quite a few here. I'm going to plant them in this bed, and they're going to take a year to even get to an individual garlic clove stage, and then they're going to take another year before they come to anything remotely like this, possibly 3. And around me I've got these beautiful cosmos and echium, and you may remember that I planted this with all the seeds, old seeds that I didn't want. And these have been phenomenal. Being a long-term project, I know I'm going to forget what I put in there. I'm going to label it. Then there'll be no confusion in the middle of winter. I'm assessing my wild white border at the end of the season because I don't feel it's been quite as good as it was the year before. I need something for the spring to lift the border, so I've chosen a tulip, and it's Purissima, also known as White Emperor, and it's a perennial one, so it should come back next year. And the reason I've chosen it is that I've grown it before, so I know it. And it has nice sturdy stems for this windy Welsh weather, and it has a lovely flower which holds on its stem for quite some time. This is not an ideal place for tulips because it doesn't get too much sun, so I'm going to have to treat them quite carefully. First, I've got a new tool. Pop it in and twist it around. And if it meets a stone, it rotates itself past it. Bit of a wiggle to get it out. Although it's stony, it is quite damp, and tulips don't like to have their roots damp. So I'm going to put in some gravel at the bottom. Now I've mixed the gravel with a bit of bloodfish and bone because I want the tulip to have the best start, and it needs a bit of something to keep it going through the winter. Well, we all do, don't we, really? And pop it into the hole. Pointy side up. Down it goes, all snuggly in the soil. Tamp it down a little bit. Top it up with some peat-free compost. Nestle it in for the winter. I'm only going to plant 10 tulips because I'm not sure it's going to work. And if it does, I can then buy some more. And that's the thing about gardening. You need patience. These will be ready in the spring. The garlic will take probably 2 years. And I may not see a walnut from the walnut tree for 10 years. Sometimes the longer the wait, the sweeter the reward. And with all these projects, I hope they're going to give me pleasure in the garden for many years to come.
Of course, to be a gardener requires so much patience, but looking forward to stuff is the best part, the anticipation of what's to come. And one of the best things for that anticipation is planting bulbs. When I first came here, this gravel garden was full of beautiful orange digitalis, the parviflora. They were beautifully flowering, and now they've got these seed heads that give stature and grace to the autumn garden here. But what I'm going to do now is look ahead to not next season, not winter, but the spring after. And the bulb I'm going to plant in here is a pretty special tulip. It's a species tulip called Orphanidia. Now, often when you buy tulip bulbs at this time of the year and plant them, they're very highly bred and they will flower beautifully for a year. They might come back a second or even a third, but this will reliably come back every year, and they naturalise and they'll form little clumps here. Now these ones have a kind of flame-coloured flower that ranges from yellow through to red, and they almost turn back like little jester hat petals, but much smaller than your normal tulip flower. These tulips can cope with rain, but they really don't like to sit in the water, so they'll be very happy here in the gravel garden. Or if you had a very sunny, baked, free draining area in your garden, or even a pot that you mix lots of gravel in with, they should do just as well there, as long as it's bright and sunny. Now this is one of my favourite autumn jobs, but there are many other things that you can be getting on with this weekend if you fancy it. This is the perfect time of year for dividing herbaceous perennials that have lost their vigour and stopped flowering so much. Start by cutting back the stems of the clump that you want to remove, and then either chop it or fork it out of the ground, making sure you have plenty of roots and shoots on all the parts you're replanting. Then simply put them wherever else you want them in the garden. Over the course of summer, a huge amount of dust and maybe even some algae can build up on the glass of your greenhouse. This reduces the light levels over the winter, an all-important time for plants to continue photosynthesizing, so cleaning it off is really helpful. Use some water and a splash of vinegar. Wash it off with a cloth and then dry it down for the best results. If you want to use any plant material you chop back now but don't necessarily have space for a compost heap, then you can use the chop and drop method. Simply cut back any old stems or plants, save any seed heads for the birds to be fed over the winter, and then chop up into small pieces all of the plant material and let it fall onto the ground. This will act as a mulch that will hold in moisture and feed the soil, and also as excellent habitat for any insects over the winter. Well, it's been a very lovely gift of a day here at Damson Farm, and actually beautiful seeing this really special garden at its best. It's a place where there's so much going on. Aspirations for me personally to one day achieve this level of beauty and productivity and that really lovely, ethical, biodiverse approach to gardening. It's been so lovely to spend the day here getting our hands dirty. But that's it for today. And Monty's back next week at Longmeadow, so until next time, it's goodbye.